She said she loved you. But it wasn't love. It was anesthesia. She looked into your eyes and made you feel chosen. Not just liked, not just wanted. Chosen. Like a man picked by fate. And that feeling, you built your entire self around it. But now she's gone, like none of it meant anything. Like your heart was just a moment she wandered through before vanishing into silence. And you still don't understand why. How can someone go from "I need you" to disappearing without looking back? Let me explain what nobody had the courage to tell you. She didn't love you. She loved the feeling you gave her. The momentary escape from herself. And when that feeling faded, so did she. You didn't lose love. You lost a role in a script that was never written for you. She cast you to play a part, the protector, the healer, the savior. And the moment you stopped fitting the fantasy, she changed the actor. Carl Jung called this projection, a process where someone unconsciously places their inner needs onto another person, expecting salvation. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. She didn't see you. She saw an image built by her wounds. And you mistook being desired for being known. You mistook being chosen for being understood. She said, "You make me feel safe." But she wasn't choosing your soul. She was choosing relief. And the worst part? Even she didn't know she was doing it, because most people don't enter relationships to connect. They enter them to escape. And you were her exit sign, not her destination. Gabor Maté calls this the attachment wound. We are attracted not to people who make us feel loved, but to people who make us feel familiar, even if that familiarity is pain. You weren't a man to her. You were a mirror, a reflection of who she hoped she could become if she stood close enough to your light. But mirrors don't heal. They only reveal. And when she started to see the parts of herself she couldn't handle, she blamed the mirror. She blamed you. But what if she never disappeared? What if the version of her you loved never really existed? She said you made her feel safe. She opened up. She cried in your arms. She told you things she'd never told anyone, and you thought that meant something. You thought that kind of intimacy was sacred. You thought that kind of vulnerability was proof of love. But here's what most men never understand. Just because she opened up to you doesn't mean she ever planned to stay. Some women don't seek partners, they seek emotional shelter. You became her soft place to land, but not her destination. You were never the man she wanted to build with. You were the man she needed to breathe for a moment. And once she caught her breath, she left. You were her comfort, her container, her fix, but comfort without chaos feels like a cage to someone addicted to emotional survival. Psychologist Esther Perel explains, we are most drawn to what we know, not what we need. We seek what is familiar even when it hurts. To her nervous system, peace felt unfamiliar. Your calm felt foreign. Your consistency triggered not desire, but discomfort. Why? Because many people are wired for emotional survival, not love. They mistake intensity for connection. And when you didn't give her that roller coaster, her mind said, this isn't love. But it was. It was love in its purest form. She just didn't recognize it, because no one ever taught her what love without anxiety actually feels like. Clinical trauma expert Dr. Gabor Maté puts it this way: when we have unresolved childhood trauma, we don't fall in love, we fall into patterns. We call it chemistry, but really it's reactivity. She wasn't reacting to you. She was reacting to the absence of what she's used to: pain, volatility, chaos. And in that space of unfamiliar peace, she began to pull away. Not because you weren't enough, but because your calm exposed a part of her that had never known stability. You were the quiet room after the war, but she only knew how to sleep to the sound of sirens. You were the still water, but she only learned to swim through storms. She thought she wanted peace, but when she met it, she ran. You gave her everything she said she wanted, and still she left. But what if giving her peace was the very thing that made her feel unsafe? She said she felt safe with you, that you were different, that she could finally breathe. But what she didn't say is that she saw you as her healing place, not her equal. You became her soft landing, her late-night reassurance, her stability when her life was chaos. And at first, that felt like connection, like love. But there's a silent killer of attraction most men never see coming. When she starts turning to you to feel better, instead of feel you. You weren't the man she desired. You were the man she leaned on. Emotionally available, endlessly giving, and completely blind to the fact that you were becoming her emotional caretaker, not her partner. And slowly, something shifted. She stopped looking at you with hunger. She started looking at you like a diary. And you thought that meant you were doing something right. Because every time she cried, you held her. Every time she panicked, you softened. But the more you gave, the more she drifted. Because you weren't just loving her, you were trying to heal her. And that's the moment her attraction began to die. Yeah, attachment theory teaches us that many women unconsciously seek emotional containers for the chaos they've never learned to manage. You became that container. You held her stories, her past, her fears, her pain. But in holding all of her, you dropped yourself. You stopped being the man she was drawn to. You became the one who absorbed her damage. And here's the brutal twist. No woman wants to kiss her therapist. Clinical trauma expert Dr. Gabor Maté explains, when someone hasn't healed, they don't fall in love with a person. They fall in love with what that person can do for their pain. You weren't her passion. You were her prescription. And no one stays addicted to medicine once the symptoms fade. You thought love meant holding her through the storm. But she wasn't looking for a man to walk beside her. She was looking for a place to collapse. And you became that place. You didn't realize it, but every time you carried her pain, you made it easier for her to avoid her own healing. You were the fire that warmed her until she no longer needed heat. And then, she vanished. You thought the more you gave, the more she'd stay. But what if every time you held her together, she respected you less? You thought that love meant showing up, being consistent, being kind, being available. You thought that proving yourself by being better than every man who hurt her would make her stay. But what you didn't know is this: attraction doesn't grow in the soil of emotional servitude. It dies there. Because while you were loving her gently, while you were giving without condition, while you were choosing her over yourself, you were slowly teaching her one thing. You were willing to abandon yourself, just to be chosen. And she felt it. She felt your fear. She felt the desperation behind the kindness, the craving behind the compliments, the need behind your presence. And no matter how pure your heart was, it began to suffocate her desire. You didn't just love her, you idolized her. You saw her not as a human being, but as a cure for your loneliness, for your pain, for your wounds. You weren't just showing up for her, you were disappearing for her. And slowly, she started pulling away. Not because you were too good, but because your goodness wasn't rooted in strength. It was rooted in fear. The fear of losing her. The fear of being alone. The fear that, if you stopped giving, you would no longer be enough. Psychologist Nathaniel Branden, in his work on self-esteem and relationships, wrote, "If my sense of worth depends on your acceptance of me, then I have made you my God. And gods aren't attractive. They're worshipped, not desired." When a man places a woman above himself, he creates imbalance, and what begins as admiration turns into emotional dependency. Your identity becomes reactive. You mirror her moods. You adjust your truth to preserve connection. You become what she needs and lose who you are. And deep down, she can feel it. She can feel that your self-worth is fragile, that your masculinity is conditional, that your strength is performative, not internal. And no woman can relax into a man whose sense of self depends on her approval. You thought you were building a temple of love, but it became a shrine, a place where you sacrificed your own needs just to keep her worshipped. You placed her on a pedestal, and from there, the only direction left was down. She didn't leave because you were too good. She left because you disappeared inside your goodness. But what if the part of you that she needed to feel turned on by was the one you were hiding the most? She told you she wanted a man who listens, who's present, who's kind. And you were all of that, and more. You gave her your attention. You gave her your time. You gave her parts of yourself that no one else had ever touched. You made her feel understood. And still, she lost interest. And you thought, what else could I have done? But that question hides the truth, because it assumes that what she wanted was what she needed, and it assumes that being nice is the same as being real, but they're not. Nice is what you do to be accepted. Real is who you are with or without approval. Nice bends to keep peace. Real holds truth, even if it creates discomfort. Nice puts her on a pedestal. Real stands next to her as an equal. And the problem is, you gave her safety, but you stopped giving her you. You censored your opinions. You softened your edges. You withheld your boundaries. Not because you're weak, but because you believed that being good meant being harmless. But being harmless isn't attractive. It's forgettable. She didn't need a mirror. She needed a man, someone grounded in himself, someone who doesn't abandon his values to gain approval. Because here's the paradox. The more you avoid conflict, the more she questions your core. And a man with no fire feels safe, yes, but also empty. Psychotherapist Dr. Robert Glover, author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, explains, "Nice guys believe that if they are good, giving, and caring, they will be loved, get their needs met, and have a smooth life. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does attraction, because women don't desire perfection. They desire presence. They desire authenticity. They desire energy that isn't filtered through fear. When you became too agreeable, too accommodating, too afraid to take up space, you stopped being a man to her. You became an extension of her, and no one feels desire for what they control. You were the candle that dimmed itself to avoid burning her skin. But the very thing that drew her in was your light, not your silence. And when that flame went cold, so did her body, so did her attention, so did her loyalty. She didn't leave because you were too safe. She left because you were no longer dangerous in your truth. But what if your power isn't in being what she wants, but in being who she can't control? She said you were safe. She said you made her feel calm. She said you were everything she ever wanted. But slowly, something changed. She stopped texting first. stopped asking about your day, stopped touching you like she used to. And when you asked what was wrong, she said, "Nothing." But you felt it, in your gut, in her eyes, in the way she stopped looking at you like a man and started treating you like a friend. You did everything right. You avoided conflict. You were always available. You never raised your voice, never made demands. But here's the brutal truth. In trying not to lose her, you lost yourself. You thought love meant saying yes, letting things slide, being understanding, being soft. But there's a difference between being loving and being passive. And most men only realize this when it's too late. Because women don't stop desiring you when you're cruel. They stop desiring you when you're invisible. And you became invisible the moment you stopped saying no. No to disrespect. No to double standards. No to sacrificing your needs just to avoid making her uncomfortable. Psychologist and researcher Terence Real explains, when a man suppresses his boundaries to preserve harmony, he thinks he's protecting the relationship, but what he's really doing is killing his presence. Presence isn't about being there physically. It's about taking up space emotionally. It's about being rooted in who you are, not walking on eggshells to keep her happy. And deep down, she felt the absence of your fire. She lost respect not because you were bad, but because you were predictable. There was no edge, no tension, no masculine container she could lean into and test against. And without that contrast, desire dies. You were a fireplace with no flame, polished, pretty, safe, but cold. And while she admired your frame, what she really craved was the heat, the kind that makes her feel your presence before you speak, the kind that makes her second-guess herself when she crosses a line, the kind of fire that says, "I love you, but I won't abandon me to keep you." She didn't stop loving you because you lacked softness. She stopped because you lacked structure. But what if your boundaries aren't what push women away, but what finally make them feel you again? You gave everything. Your time, your energy, your patience. You showed up when she needed you. You stayed silent when she pushed you. You made space for her chaos, but never made space for your pain. Because somewhere deep inside you believed that if you just loved her enough, she'd finally feel safe enough to stay. But here's the hidden cost of that devotion. When you give without limits, you teach her to love you without depth. You become the provider of comfort, not the recipient of respect. The caretaker, not the equal. You stop being seen as a man and start being used as a container. And it's not because she's evil. It's because you taught her that your needs were optional. You thought love meant enduring, but enduring isn't connection. Enduring is suppression. It's the slow bleeding of your truth to keep peace that isn't even real. And the worst part? You smiled through it. You played strong. You told yourself, real men don't complain. If I say something, I'll push her away. She's just going through something. I'll hold on. But over time, she stopped seeing you as strong, because strength without self-respect isn't masculine. It's martyrdom, and no woman wants to build a life with a man who doesn't protect himself from being erased. Psychologist Harriet Lerner, author of The Dance of Intimacy, wrote, "When one person is always giving and the other is always taking, resentment replaces love, silently and with time, completely." You thought you were loving her, but you were teaching her how to love someone who doesn't require anything back. That's not intimacy. That's imbalance. That's the slow death of masculine polarity. And eventually, she stopped being curious about you, stopped chasing, stopped wondering, because she knew you'd always be there, no matter how little she gave in return. You became the tree that never stopped offering shade, even when she broke your branches. You stood tall, but slowly hollowed yourself out from the inside, until one day she walked away, not because you weren't enough, but because you made her the center of your world and vanished from your own. You weren't too soft, you were too selfless, in a way that made you disappear. But what if reclaiming your presence is the only way to ever be truly loved? Before she walked into your life, you had an identity. Maybe you were focused. Maybe you were building something. Maybe you had direction, even if you were still figuring it out. But slowly, almost invisibly, you started orbiting around her world. Her moods, her needs, her validation. Your goals got softer, your ambition quieter, your time less yours, and you didn't even notice it, because it felt like love. You thought, this is what being a good man looks like. You made her your sun, and you became the satellite. And here's the tragedy. She didn't ask for that, and she didn't respect it either. Because a woman can't feel anchored to a man who's spinning around her gravity. You stopped leading your life. You started managing hers. And while you believed your sacrifices were invisible trophies of love, she experienced them as a slow erosion of presence. She stopped feeling pulled toward you because you stopped moving forward. And in that stillness, the attraction died. Not because you lacked value, but because you stopped protecting the man you were becoming before she arrived. Psychologist and Jungian analyst James Hollis said, "The goal of every relationship is not to complete you, but to reflect the work you must do to complete yourself." But most men fall into a dangerous pattern. They trade self-direction for emotional access. They think that giving up their mission will make them more lovable. But what it really does is make them forgettable. Because love isn't built on sacrifice alone. It's built on polarity, on two individuals walking their path, with or without each other. When you lose your path, you become predictable. Emotionally available, yes, but spiritually empty. And no woman can stay magnetized to a man who doesn't even know what direction he's walking in. You were a river, moving, cutting through stone, shaping valleys. But when she came, you turned into a pond, still, quiet, contained, and she came to drink from you until the water grew stagnant, and she wandered off in search of a current again. You didn't lose her, you lost yourself, piece by piece, until she had nothing left to feel pulled toward. But what if the only way to win her respect is to stop orbiting around anyone but your purpose? She didn't fall for your looks, or your kindness, or your loyalty. She fell, at the beginning, for the way you moved, the way your words had weight, the way your eyes stayed fixed on something beyond her, a mission, a purpose, a direction. She didn't say it out loud. Maybe she didn't even realize it. But a woman's body knows when she's in the presence of a man who's walking his path. And just as powerfully, she feels it the moment he strays. Because masculine direction isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout. It's in how you wake up, how you say no, how you choose where you're going and let the world catch up or fall away. And when that direction fades, so does the attraction. You thought presence meant being available, but presence without purpose is weightless. It fills the space, but it doesn't lead. You were there for her, but you weren't there for yourself. And the moment your attention shifted from your path to her reactions, from your growth to her comfort, from your boundaries to her emotions, she started to feel something she couldn't explain, a quiet disappointment, a subtle collapse of tension, the loss of the man she almost respected. Not because you changed who you were, but because you abandoned what drove you. Psychologist David Data, in The Way of the Superior Man, writes, "A man's purpose must come before his relationship. If not, he becomes dependent, resentful, and ultimately unattractive." That doesn't mean neglecting her. It means centering yourself. Because a man who knows where he's going moves differently. He's not shaken by silence. He doesn't panic when she pulls away. He doesn't trade his truth for temporary peace. His path becomes the magnet. His vision becomes the container. And his presence, even in silence, commands more attention than any performance ever could. You were once the mountain, and she was drawn to your silence, your stillness, your strength. But when you descended for her, you lost the altitude of perspective. You became reachable, touchable, but no longer magnetic. And in becoming more available, you became less inspiring. She didn't leave because you were too distant. She left because you stopped being the mountain. You thought that chasing made her feel loved. But what if the real power is in standing still while everything else moves around you? You thought she broke you, that her leaving meant something was wrong with you, that you were too soft, too much, too intense, too available. But the truth is this: she didn't destroy you. She exposed the parts of you that were already abandoned. Her silence revealed your fear. Her distance revealed your self-forgetting. Her disinterest revealed your disconnection from purpose. And that's the part no one tells you. Sometimes the woman who leaves is the mirror that saves your life. Because her absence isn't the beginning of your collapse. It's the beginning of your clarity. You don't need to become colder or meaner or fake a masculine frame to impress anyone. You need to become true. True to your voice, true to your standards, true to your damn direction. Because love was never supposed to cost you your identity. She left, but what if that wasn't punishment? What if that was protection? What if she was never meant to stay because her exit was the only thing that could wake you up? The pain you feel right now, that weight in your chest, that feeling of not being enough, it's not weakness. It's evidence that your heart is alive, that your soul is demanding you rebuild. And not as who you were with her, but as the man you forgot to be before her. Jung said it best: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." This wasn't fate, it was a pattern, and now you see it. You see that being chosen isn't love, that sacrificing your truth isn't devotion, that making her your God only ever made you disappear. So now, you stop running. You stop chasing. You stop begging for connection that requires your silence. And instead, you walk back into your mission, back into your presence, back into your fucking power. You were never broken. You were just buried under her praise, under your guilt, under the illusion that love means being less than yourself. But now the storm has passed, and what's left is a man forged by loss and reborn through self-remembrance. She didn't take your power. She showed you where you left it. If something inside you stirred while listening to this, you're not broken. You're remembering. And you're already steps ahead of most men. This is your awakening. This is where the weak die and the real you begins. Welcome back. Never again will you trade your soul just to be chosen.